Hey guys, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am filming my long overdue Japan Q&A. A few of my videos back I asked you guys to send me all of your questions about Japan, solo traveling, about anything you really liked, and you guys went all out. I got like 300 plus questions. So for today's video, I picked all of the most asked questions, and even then, it's still quite a lot. If you are new to my channel, I make a lot of Japan travel related content about solo traveling and daily vlogs every time I go to Japan. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will leave it in the description box below. I've got my tea in my Japan mug, of course, because it's gonna be a long one. So let's get started. Do you need to know Japanese to visit Japan? No, definitely not. You do not need to speak Japanese to enjoy everything that Japan has to offer, especially if you travel in the major cities, Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. A lot of the signs in public transport and the menus at restaurants and things do have English, so generally you will be fine. But I definitely think that if you try to learn a little bit of Japanese before you go, like basic things like hello, thank you, excuse me, that'll really enrich your trip and make it a lot more enjoyable, because you can immerse yourself in the culture a little bit more. Can you pay with card in Japan? Yes and no. Japan is still a really cash-based society, so most small restaurants and small shops will only accept cash, but larger shops like inside the station or at hotels or major restaurants, they will all take card. And a lot of the major cities will also have their own kind of transit card, like a Suica or Pasmo or Ikoka. You use it to pay for all of your travel on the train or on buses and things like that, but you can also load it with money electronically as well, and then use that as a pseudo debit card in most shops as well. Whenever I go to Japan, I just tend to get a international travel card and I load money onto that, and then I just get cash out at an ATM when it suits me. And that way I'm not carrying like a ton of cash around all the time. How do you plan your trips? I could talk for ages on how I plan my trips, so I might make that a whole other video, but generally what I do is first I'll work out all of the places that I want to visit, and then I'll try and group like for like things together. Generally the first thing I tend to do is look up guides on Pinterest. I do have a Pinterest board completely dedicated to Japan planning. It's called my Japlanning board. Thank you very much. I'll put a link to it in the description box below if you guys want to go check it out, because I do pin a lot of travel tips around Japan in that board. But I'll generally look at articles on Pinterest to get ideas, and then once I write down all of the different things that I want to do and places that I want to go, then I'll try and lump things that are close by into one day. I tend not to have a very strict itinerary, so once I've done that exercise where I've got a bunch of grouped activities together, then I'll just decide the night before which group of activities I feel like doing the next day. And I find that really works for me. Do you ever feel lonely or bored solo traveling? Nope, not really, because I am more of an introvert. I'm very independent and I really enjoy having my time alone. I actually really like being able to travel and choose exactly what I want to do on what day and when. And when you travel solo, you have the freedom to make all of those decisions by yourself. Put it this way, I think that everyone should solo travel at least once. It gives you so much freedom. It's a great experience. You do learn a lot about yourself, but I do highly recommend it. Where are the best places to buy anime goods in Japan? Ooh, one place I can really recommend. Every time I go to Akihabara in Tokyo, there is a store there called Kotobukiya. It is a multi-level store, and they have a different level for like manga, video game goods, anime goods, and they even have a floor for the Tales shop. So if you are a fan of the JRPG video game series Tales of, which I am, Tales of Symphonia is one of my all-time favorites. They have a store completely dedicated to that game as well inside Kotobukiya. It is amazing. Another really good one is the Animate store in Ikebukuro. There are a lot of Animate stores all around Tokyo, but there is a really big one in Ikebukuro, and that has like, I don't know, 7 or 8 floors. Again, dedicated to manga, anime. You can buy merchandise. If you are an anime, manga, or video game fan, highly recommend checking those two stores out. When you travel to Japan, are you treated differently as a foreigner? Not really, because my background is Chinese and Australian. I am a halfie. Outwardly, I do look Asian, so most of the time I do blend in. But because my Japanese isn't fluent, as soon as I speak to someone and they realize that it is a second language for me, then generally they're just you know, even extra accommodating. So I've never had any negative experiences. Generally, it's been really positive. How did you learn Japanese? I was lucky. It was one of the second languages offered at my high school, so I studied Japanese all the way from year 7 to year 12. So I had 5 years where I could immerse myself in the language, and I also did a study exchange in my final year of high school. I also took a semester of it at university, and since then I've just been trying to keep my skills fresh by using apps like Duolingo, but my skill is definitely nowhere near as strong as it was when I was in high school. That was like my peak Japanese skill level. How do you avoid feeling awkward while doing things alone? This took a little while. It takes practice not to feel orcs AF when you're walking around by yourself. But I think what's different about Japan to my home country of Australia is that it is very normal to do things alone in Japan. It's very common to see people eating dinner alone, walking alone, going to Disneyland alone. Generally, if you're solo traveling in Japan, you don't look out of place. How do you manage travel stress and anxiety? My biggest tip that works for me is being prepared AF for anything. So for example, one of the biggest travel stresses for me is making sure I get to where I need to go. I get really worried about missing my flight, about missing a train, getting on the wrong train, and all of those things just tend to cause me a lot of stress. So what I do is the night before, I always plan out what train I need to catch at what time. I use the app Hyperdia. It's basically just a transit travel planning app. It's very, very good. And that tells me exactly what platform I need to be on at what time, what the name of the train is, everything. And the more details I have, the more stress-free the situation becomes. And before I catch my flight, I also make sure that I've printed out all of my documents in a physical folder that I can take with me that has all of my addresses in it, like my accommodation. It has what train I need to take from the airport to get to my accommodation, as well as the phone numbers of anyone that I need to contact when I get to Japan.
Because the amount of times this folder has saved us and it's only been 3 days in, like, invaluable.
How do you take your photos by yourself? Good question, because it's not easy when you're solo traveling and you don't want all of your photos to just be selfies, and it's awkward asking people to take photos for you. So I actually just use good old-fashioned self-timer. The camera that I'm filming on right now is the Canon G7X Mark II, and it does have a function where you can hook up the Bluetooth on the camera to your phone, and then you can use your phone to actually act as a Bluetooth clicker. So all I do is I put my camera on my tripod, I set it up into a location that I want to have my photo taken, and then I just press the button on my phone and then it takes the photo for me. I'll put up a couple of photos that I've taken that way up on the screen, and I think they turned out pretty well. What are your favorite restaurants in Japan? Can I include cafes on here because I am much more of a cafe gal? Cafe Kitsune in Aoyama is one of my all-time favorite cafes. It is my #1 favorite cafe in Tokyo. They do really good coffee and it's set away from the main street, so it's a very quiet, like chill place to relax. I also really love Nabezo, which is a shabu shabu hot pot restaurant. It's great to go with a bunch of friends, and it is a buffet, so you can just get as many different shabu shabu ingredients that you want. Dumplings, noodles, vegetables, anything, and then you cook it yourself at your table. It is so much fun and the food is really, really good. And then if you're into ramen, Ichiran is of course the obvious choice. They do really good ramen and you order it off a vending machine, so it does have that cool, like, you know, unique to Japan kind of vibe. But if you're looking for just really damn good ramen, I would go to Mutekiya in Ikebukuro. They do the most succulent, juicy, like pork ramen. Oh, just thinking about it. The line is always really long, but it is worth the wait. What area of Tokyo do you recommend staying in? I get asked this question a lot. My personal preference is to stay in neighborhoods that are outside of Shibuya and Shinjuku, or on the outskirts, because they're a lot more quiet and more residential. My two favorite neighborhoods are Ebisu and Hiro. They have a bunch of really cool restaurants and cafes, but it's just a lot more laid back and chill. What do you do for a living and how do you afford to travel so much? I got asked this question a lot. I work in digital marketing, and while it may seem that I'm in Japan all the time, I really only go there for 2 weeks of the entire year. So I end up just saving every month a little portion of my paycheck, which I put aside for my trip to Japan. And that's as complicated as it is, really. What is the best season to travel Japan? Autumn. I know everyone's going to say, no, it's spring, it's when the cherry blossoms are out and it's so beautiful and lovely, but it's also super crowded. Flights, accommodation, food, everything is so much more expensive in cherry blossom season, and there are just so many people all traveling at the same time, whereas autumn is absolutely beautiful in Japan. All of the trees turn red, yellow, and orange, and it is gorgeous, and there are just nowhere near as many people around. And the weather is still really nice. It's not that cold, it's not that warm, you can get away with just a light jacket, so you can travel lightly. It's just, I love traveling in autumn. What is your favorite moment while traveling in Japan, and what made it so special? This is a moment I will never forget. It's actually from the very first time I went to Japan. I was 16 years old. I was just about to enter my final year of high school, and I went on a study tour with my class. I remember I was with my class walking through Ginza, and it was near Christmas, so all of the Christmas lights were out and the whole city looked absolutely beautiful. It was nighttime and it had just started to snow. After 5 years of wanting to go to Japan, that moment, it finally dawned on me that I was in Tokyo, I was in my dream city, everything was beautiful, it started to snow, and it doesn't really snow in Australia. I remember tearing up on the street. It was just a magical feeling, and honestly, that magical feeling has never gone away, and that's why I keep going back. What is your favorite anime? Where do I begin? Okay, the obvious one, Fruits Basket. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you know that I love Fruits Basket. I've got the entire manga series and I've watched both animes, just the original and the new one that they released this year. It is so good. Fruits Basket will always be my number one. But this year I also really enjoyed My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, and the one that I am currently watching and reading right now, which is really, really funny, is Love is Hard for Otaku. If you haven't seen that, it is very, very funny. If you're into any kind of pop culture, you will relate to it so hard. What other countries do you want to visit other than Japan? Can I just choose Japan again? I think even though I have been to Japan 6 times, I've always gone for a short period of time. The longest time that I have been there is 3 weeks, which is just not enough time. So I think I'll just keep going until I have had enough. Who knows when that's gonna be. I'd also really like to travel around Europe, and then I also want to visit the US one day. But right now, Japan is still the number one. There's still a lot of questions to go. What started your interest in Japan? When I was a kid, I grew up watching Sailor Moon and Pokemon and playing my Nintendo 64 and my Game Boy Color. And then when I got to high school, I had the option to learn French or Japanese because everyone had to learn a second language as part of the curriculum. And so for me, it was easy. I'm like, I'll learn Japanese. But then I started to learn about the culture, the food, the way of life, and I just became really interested in Japan. And so when I had the opportunity to go there for the very first time as a 16-year-old on a study tour, I snapped that up, and from there I keep going back. So now I've been 6 times in the past 10 years and I'm loving it. In Tokyo, what underrated things to do or places to go do you recommend? I love all of the little neighborhoods of Tokyo that aren't in the main city area. I love Nakameguro, I love Shimokitazawa, Ebisu. They're about 15 or so minutes on the train from Shinjuku, Shibuya kind of area, and they all have their own unique vibe. They have really cool cafes, cool shops, and while they don't have the hustle and bustle and flashing lights of the city, they're just really relaxed ways to spend a day. So if you've got a spare day on your trip when you go to Tokyo, I highly recommend going outside of the main area of the city and exploring these places because they are a lovely, lovely day out. I've made videos on all 3 of those neighborhoods as well, so I will leave links to those in the description if you want to go check them out. What's your favorite day trip from Tokyo? Kamakura is a really good one. It's around an hour from the main city of Tokyo, and it's in more of a coastal area. So I've heard that it's really, really nice in summer. I went there in spring, and it's famous for the Daibutsu Big Buddha. They have a lot of temples and shrines, and there is a lovely long shopping street where you can buy local goods, souvenirs, and little street vendor snacks. So it's a really fun little day out. Do you want to live in Japan? And this question was asked a lot, understandably. I would love, love, love to go and live in Japan one day. There are still a lot of things I want to achieve here in Australia, in my home country, before I go and do that. But it has always been sort of the the stretch target, the big dream. So it's the kind of box that I know I'll need to tick one day to end up achieving, you know, the list of life goals that I have. What's your favorite convenience store food in Japan? Without a doubt, there are always two things that I always buy from konbini, and they are tamago sando, which are their egg salad sandwiches, and tuna mayonnaise onigiri rice balls. They're just delicious. Another weird one that I really like whenever I go to konbini are boiled eggs. I don't know what it is, but you can buy single hard-boiled eggs and they're delicious. You just crack them open, peel open the shell, and they're like salty and delicious, and they're like 80 cents. I'm gonna stop talking about eggs now because it's getting weird, but what advice would you give a vegan traveling to Japan? There are definitely vegan options in Japan, but a lot less than there would be in a Western country. Especially in the major cities, there are a lot of cafes now that sell vegan options. There's also a really good ramen place in Shimokitazawa called Shabuton, which sell a vegan ramen and vegan dumplings. So I would look up a bunch of places that have vegan food before you travel, and then if you can't find anywhere near the places that you want to go, then I would bring food with you just in case. A lot of convenience stores do sell vegetarian items as well as salads and things like that, so at least you'll have a backup and you're not going to go hungry. Veganism is still a fairly new concept in Japan. A lot of restaurants will have a vegetarian option, but they might not necessarily exclude animal products, so just do your research before you head over. Where else in Japan do you want to visit? Because I only ever go to Japan for short periods of time, I never really get the chance to go outside of the main cities of Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, but I really want to go to Fukuoka and go back to Sapporo. Sapporo is where I did my homestay when I was in high school, and it was such a fun place to be, and the food is so good. So I'd love to go back there now as an adult. And I also want to visit more of the countryside areas in southern Japan. That has been on my list for a really long time, but I just want to dedicate the actual time to go there and visit, as opposed to just see it for a day and then come back. Which is better, hotels or Airbnb? It depends on your budget. Hotels are very expensive in Japan, and often what you're paying for is pretty small. Personally, I love Airbnbs because I like the feeling of being in a local neighborhood, and it gives you a lot more space. You have a whole apartment to yourself as opposed to a hotel room. There was one hotel room I stayed in where it had a corridor that was only just big enough for one person to squeeze through, and then the bed literally took up the entire sort of living space, so it's small. But there are a lot more regulations around Airbnbs now, and there's a lot less of them on the market than there were a few years ago, and they're getting a bit more expensive. But if you can find a good Airbnb, I highly recommend it because I much prefer staying in them over hotels. But if money is no object, luxury hotels in Japan are also absolutely beautiful, so So that is it for all of the questions. Thank you so much if one of them was yours. I hope you found this video helpful in planning your trip to Japan. If there's anything you want to know that I didn't touch on in this video, let me know in the comments below and I will chat to you there. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye!